Like most guys, I like my fried chips, and used to have them most nights. I don't do that anymore, but I used to have the wire basket on the stove, heat the oil and put the basket into the oil and cook the chips. And this particular night, I did my normal routine with them. Sat at the table only a few feet away and waited for the oil to warm up. And as soon as I sat down, after putting the stove on, there was a tap, tap, tap on the side window, and the neighbour next door was yelling and screaming in a panic. He said that he'd hit some sort of a water pipe, and because I was familiar with his plumbing system, he wanted me to go and check it out. And he said, "Are you doing anything?" And I had totally gone out of my mind that I'd just put the stove on and put the oil on. So I said, "No, I'm not doing anything." So I went in nice and calmly with him and chatted with him for over half an hour while I was in there, until he said, "Is that your alarm?" And I said, "No, I haven't got an alarm." And he said, "No, is this a smoke alarm?" And as soon as he said smoke alarm, it clicked. I realised that I'd put the stove on, and I took off up his driveway and out the front and across and down my driveway and in through the front door, which was all open. Halfway down the passage, the door was closed, and I couldn't see through it. It was a glass door. I hit the handle without even losing stride. I hit the handle and the door flew open with a crash. It turned out the crash was my poor little dog on the other side. I just about killed her with the opening of the door. I kept on going down to the back of the house. It was pitch black. It was full of soot. I was breathing soot. I had to hold my breath. I couldn't breathe in the smoke and soot. It was just so black, and no oxygen in it. And I got down to the kitchen, which was right at the back of the house, and the stove was roaring away, flames lapping up to the top cupboards, and I grabbed an extinguisher which was in that room, and those fire extinguishers, the little 1 kilogram fire extinguishers, not worth 2 bob. They last about 4 seconds, and they're useless on any sort of a fire as far as I'm concerned. 3 of them I went through. I had 2 more in other areas of the house, and I raced out the front to get some air, grabbed another extinguisher, took that back in, hit it with that extinguisher, couldn't breathe while I was there, just about passed out with the black smoke. It was 100% soot and smoke. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face. And I went through 3 extinguishers on 3 trips, and finally I came out the front. I collapsed on the lawn out here. I could hear the fire brigade bells. I knew that they were pretty close by, and I was thinking to myself, I'm going to lose the house. I'm going to lose the cars. I've got classic cars all over the backyard. There was one on the other side of the wall that was burning, that was up on stands. A $70,000 restoration. That was going to go, and all I could think of was losing everything. And what can I do? It must be something else I can do. I realised that my motorhome out the front here, which I'd been working on, I'd actually taken the 2.5 kilogram fire extinguisher out of it at least 3 or 4 times over the previous couple of months, and I'd put it back in there on its bracket the day before the fire. So I dived into the motorhome, which fortunately was unlocked, raced into the house with the big fire extinguisher and hit the fire. Still couldn't breathe, nearly collapsed. It took me a few minutes to get the fire out, but that extinguisher finally put it out and killed the flames. But the house was absolutely chock-a-block with black smoke. I came out the front and collapsed onto the front lawn, by which time the fire brigade were here, so they put me on oxygen for a little while. Someone gave me a couple of glasses of water to wash the soot down, and the fire brigade were about to go in with their hose when I stopped them, and I said, no, you'll destroy the house with that. I think the fire's out. So they went in with their breathing gear on and came out and said that it was out, but there was a lot of heat in there. So they sent for heat-seeking equipment, which had to be brought down specially. The guy came down and went in with that, and they were then going to rip all the plaster off the ceiling because they said there was too much heat in there, that it wasn't escaping, that must have been fire in the roof. And I said, no, don't go ripping things down until you talk to me. I said, there's a bloody ladder halfway down the passage. Pull the ladder down and you can climb up the ladder and you can see all of the roof area, which they did. And I said, there's only one good reason that all that heat's there. It's all insulated. So they went up and checked it, and there was no fire anywhere else. So they then set up a fan at the front door, big giant 1 metre wide fan at the front door, and they switched it on and they blew all of the smoke, all of that black sooty smoke, right through the house into every room that wasn't already smoke damaged. They destroyed everything in my wardrobes, everything that in every other room that hadn't been damaged. Doors hadn't been open when the fire was going, but they opened all the doors and all the windows, and they spread that soot right through every room in the house and destroyed just about everything that I owned. The neighbours next door, feeling so guilty about dragging me in there and felt that they had actually caused a lot of this damage, they volunteered to take anything that I had that could be washed. They would take it in, and they'd put clothing through the washing machine countless times. None of it was salvaged. They put all my dishes, all my white goods, they cleaned. Everything went through their dishwasher at least 4 times, 5 times. None of it was salvageable. All of it eventually got thrown out. Some of it I reused for a short while until I replaced it, but everything had to be replaced. As good as what things were still working, they look terrible with smoke stains. The black just does not come out of that stuff. And even painted things, you'd think the smoke would come off painted items. It doesn't. It leaves a stain. And it took me, well, before I say that, the fire brigade had apparently been interviewed by the local paper, unbeknownst to me. The paper never came to me for a comment, but they had told the local paper that it was only a minor fire with just a little bit of smoke damage. I had quotes, and with what I'd totalled up myself with what I had to replace, I had quotes plus my incidental damages on the white goods and clothing of over $80,000. So that's a minor fire. I'd hate to see a totally destroyed home because you just lose everything. And if I hadn't had that fire alarm going off, I'd be sitting on a vacant block of land at the moment. In those days, if you had house insurance, you had a fire levy on your house insurance. Because I wasn't insured, I hadn't paid any sort of a levy, so I got billed for the fire. But that's changed now. You pay your levy with your house rates nowadays. So I managed to save the house, I managed to save the cars, but because I was uninsured, I've been living in 2 rooms now for approximately 6 years and still trying to renovate and fix the damage on my meagre pension. I'm surprised that there's a lot of redevelopment going on in this street, and I've watched all of these new modern places go up, all these 2 stories that are surrounding me now. And I worry about what's going to happen in the future if one of those goes up, because they'll spread from one to the other. Every single one of them living with false security. They think because they're in a brand new home that they're safe, and all the regulations have been met. They've got new wiring and they've got smoke alarms, and they look after the place. They keep everything clean. There's no rubbish laying around. They think they'll never see a fire, but the fact is they still burn. And they're all built with polystyrene. They're all clad with polystyrene with a coating of hard plaster over the top of it, and then slap a paint over that. Yeah, they're living in false security in these houses with the way they're built and the materials that they use for all the polystyrene that's in them all. They'll burn in a few minutes if one of them catches fire. And they're built on the boundary line. There's no space between them anymore, so that if one goes up, they all go up. And it's an antiquated system, and I'm not keen on it. And I think the day that my next door neighbours on either side sell up and I see a house being bulldozed will be the day that I put mine on the market, because I won't live next door to one of these monsters. They're fires waiting to happen, and they do burn. You read about them in the paper all the time. Brand new house gone up in smoke while the people weren't home. Electrical fault.